Welcome, everybody. We are just thrilled to have you this morning. We have what appears to be a very, very popular topic. We have um, lots and lots and lots of people registered. In fact, we got over 300 people on right now, and we've got more coming in because I've just tried to help several. But but we are sure grateful to have Nisaa Mohammed from the Adult Protective Services here to talk to us today about recognizing and responding to adult abuse. But before we get started, we're going to talk about the CEUs for those of you that are joining us that we're looking for CEUs. Let's see if I can get it. I can get mine to advance here. There we go. For those of you today that are joining us for CEUs, we're providing complimentary CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors within the state of Texas. Please note that if you have a different license in Texas or you have a license outside of Texas, you are more than welcome to go through the process and get a certificate and submit it to your jurisdiction. Please note there's no guarantee that they'll take it, but I have had people tell me they've been able to use them for other license. And I have been contacted by jurisdictions in the past asking me for more information on a topic that we had done a webinar on, so they could decide if it met the standards that they require of their for their CEUs. So, but please note that you would have to go through the whole process to get those. And we're also offering certificates of attendance to anybody who wishes to get one. In order to qualify for any of those, today's webinar is worth 1.5 hour CEUs credits. You must complete the entire live webinar and the Q&A in order to qualify. We have advertised we're going till 11:30 today, so you're not obligated to go past 11:30 if you have another commitment, but you must stay on until we finish, or 11:30, whichever comes whichever comes first. You must also then complete a Google evaluation survey. Now, we have 3 different surveys for today's webinar, and that makes it a little bit confusing. I'm going to post, in fact, in just a second, I'm going to post in the chat a pre-survey. If you did not see that, you should have received that not only from Eventbrite, but also from Zoom when you received your login information. But if you missed that, please do the pre-survey. That's a SurveyMonkey survey. There's also a post-SurveyMonkey survey that will go out with the follow-up email. Those are both SurveyMonkey surveys, and that has to do with one piece of the funding that we get to do some of these. In order to qualify for CEUs, but you must complete the Google evaluation survey. So there's 2 SurveyMonkey surveys, the pre-webinar and the post-webinar, and then the Google evaluation survey that's required for any kind of CEUs. And I apologize, I know that's a lot. Sometimes we just have to make sure we take care of those people that provide the funding for us to bring these webinars to you. The survey, I'm sorry, the Google survey, the one for CEUs, should pop up as you close out of Zoom today. It should just ask you, Zoom should ask you if you would like to take a short survey. And if you would, you just follow that link. That will take you to the Google survey. If you don't receive it, then no worries. You will receive a follow-up email that should go out tomorrow from me following up on this webinar. And that will also have the post-webinar survey monkey and the Google survey in it. So if that's not enough, I don't know what else I could do to confuse you. But please note that the Google survey will be up for a week's time. It'll be up till the end of the day on the 7th. And then give us about a month to get those surveys out, not the surveys, the CEUs out to you, those certificates. It takes a bit for us to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Nisaa Muhammad at the Adult Protective Services. And note, I'm going to put the pre-survey evaluation in the chat here in just a second while she introduces her colleagues. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Okay.
There you go.
Let's see. One.
We're doing a little trading off here. Passing the ball.
And
Perfect. Absolutely
is it
perfect.
sharing? Everybody can see it? Okay,
We
wonderful.
can see
Okay.
it.
Well, good morning and good afternoon to some, because I saw someone is here from the United Kingdom and it's after 4 there. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for, this is really an APS 101. And there were some specific things that in talking with Donnie Green with the North Texas County Council of Governments, that she wanted to make sure that we covered in this APS 101. So I do hope that it's informative. I do have some colleagues here with me because, as we know in Adult Protective Services, we can't do anything by ourselves. It always takes partnership and collaboration. So I'll introduce them and they can wave to you. They are here. Usually when there are questions at the end, we always like to have our subject matter experts with us. So I will start with the one who also has my name on her screen, even though it's Kimberly Jackson Miles, and she's a subject matter expert in the DFW district. We also have with us Erika Mitchell. She's a subject matter expert in the DFW district, meaning they handle risk and neglect cases, and they review them and provide consultation to caseworkers and supervisors when necessary. And they do a bunch of other cool things, but that's probably all they want me to say today. And I also have...
When you're done introducing them, if I could say one more thing, I apologize. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. We also have my colleague, my counterpart in the DFW district in community engagement, Ms. Sue Ellen Stalder.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. But real quick, if you all have any questions about anything as we go through this, if you would please put your questions in the Q&A, and you can put comments you'd like to make in the chat. But please put the questions in the Q&A. It's a lot easier for us to find them, and I get to them as to having to filter through the entire chat to find your questions. So I just ask that you put your questions in the Q&A and you put any comments you have in the chat. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marty. And thank you, Marty, for this opportunity to present Adult Protective Services. And so I'm Nisaa Muhammad. I've been with the agency for 9 years, from investigation to supervision, and now in the role of community engagement. Today, we're going to talk about Adult Protective Services. Some of the slides will be specific to Texas and what we're legislated to do. by our statute and policy. And then some things are things that you can take with you, indicators and signs, things that you can be aware of just in any community. So we'll go ahead and get started. So about the agency. Our agency here is Adult Protective Services, falls under the umbrella of the Department of Family and Protective Services. And that is the department that is charged as a single state agency to protect children and adults and persons with disabilities from abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. Under that umbrella, most people are familiar with Child Protective Services or Child Protective Investigations. But the little known and smaller program, it is for adults, and that's Adult Protective Services. And we also fall under that umbrella here in the state of Texas. So what is our mission? The mission of Adult Protective Services is to protect people aged 65 years and older, or if they're 18 years to 64 years of age, with a disability from abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And we do that by investigating and providing or arranging for services that are necessary to alleviate or to prevent further maltreatment. So just some facts and figures, because it's good to know how this is affecting the larger society, especially throughout the state of Texas. So in the fiscal year 2024, APS in-home investigations program received over 125,000 intake reports. Of those, over 50,000 were confirmed as valid, meaning after the investigation, either abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation was confirmed as valid. In fiscal year 2024, over 100,000 of those intakes received in Texas included the allegation of neglect. So in a conjunction with other allegations, there was also an allegation of neglect. Over 56,000 of those intakes were received or reported by members of the community, meaning people like you, eyes and ears in the community, neighbors, family members, friends, passerbys, all of those are included. That's the community, and that's who we usually receive the reports regarding abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation from people in the community. Now, throughout the United States, the numbers, of course, they grow, but that's because in Texas, there are more than 4 million older adults, meaning people 65 years or older. There are more than 4 million in the state of Texas. Nationwide, almost 1/2 of all elderly people have a disability. So that makes them even more vulnerable to abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. In Texas alone, 1.7 million adults have a disability. So when we talk about that 18 to 64, that makes it more of an opportunity for them to have a substantial impairment, thereby making them a client for Adult Protective Services. And in the US, nearly 1 out of every 4 US adults have a disability. That just gives you an idea of how many vulnerable adults we have throughout the country. So what gives us our statutory authority to investigate, to even have an agency such as Adult Protective Services? So Title 20 of the Social Security Act mandates that every state has an agency to investigate abuse, neglect, and exploitation for children and adults. The state of Texas, through legislation in the Human Resource Code, under the chapters 40 and 48, give us the parameters of those investigations, how we investigate, and what our definitions of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation are. The Family Code, because what we investigate, family services, adults and children, the Family Code kind of breaks out for us what a family constitutes, what relatives and fictive kins are. So that helps us to learn who perpetrators and caretakers are. And the Health and Safety Code, chapters 532 and chapters 591 through 595, that actually helps us to maintain the dignity and for intellectually and developmental disabilities as well as mental health. So these codes specifically speak towards their rights and what they're able to maintain, even if they suffer from mental illness or if they have a diagnosis of intellectual or developmental disabilities. So about the people that we serve. So we talked about it a little bit. Adult Protective Services, if you're 65 years or older in the state of Texas, you're an automatic qualifier. You're automatically a client and you can receive services via an investigation through Adult Protective Services. If you're 18 years or older with a mental, physical, or developmental disability that substantially impairs the ability to provide adequately for self-care or protection, then you can also be a client to receive an investigation and services through Adult Protective Services. But in bold, you see that the words substantially impair. And so what is a substantial impairment? You might ask. Well, a substantial impairment is a disability that grossly and chronically diminishes the physical or mental ability to live independently or provide self-care. And so both of those that are in bold have to be present. It has to be both gross and chronic. So it can't be something like just a broken leg. A broken leg is gross, like that. It's a gross inability. It limits your mobility. You might not be able to stand for long periods of time, but a broken leg is not considered chronic. The perception is that a broken leg will heal and you'll return to your regular daily activities without any problem. So when we're looking at a substantial impairment, we're looking for both of those things to be present, both gross and chronic. And it will be a mental, physical, or developmental disability, a medical condition that's professionally diagnosed, and that the reported or observed behavior, it is also consistent with that diagnosis. And so you could have a chronic illness that may not be manifesting. It may not at the point that they are under the age of 65, it may not be manifesting itself to where it's grossly inhibiting them from being able to live independently or provide self-care. So we always have to have both of those things. And it has to cause a long-lasting and considerable inability to live independently or provide self-care. So again, just someone who receives a disability check, that is not an automatic qualifier for Adult Protective Services. We again are looking for those two things, gross and chronic, and then long-lasting and considerable inability. So how do we verify impairment? Some of the things that investigators or specialists would look for are shopping, cooking, housekeeping, administering medications. Are there any limitations? Are there any significant limitations to a person doing those? Do they dress in clothing that's appropriate for the weather? Do they know what clothing is appropriate for the weather? Are they able to obtain needed medical services, support services, or transportation? Are they making sound decisions? And when we say sound decisions, you see that it doesn't say, are they making good decisions? It just says sound decisions. So sound decisions, meaning they understand the decisions they're making, and they're making those decisions because they're able to and capable of doing that. And are they able to prevent harm to themselves or others? And this doesn't mean can they fight off an attack from a robber? I mean, I couldn't even do that if I had, if I had to. It just means, are they capable of calling 911, knowing what services, who to call in case of a fire or an emergency, things like that, where they're able to prevent harm to themselves or others, lock doors, keep their cell phone closed, things that that we do normally in order to prevent harm to ourselves or to others who are in charge, who we are in charge of. So what is abuse, neglect, and exploitation? So in the state of Texas, we have specific definitions of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And this is what our investigators and specialists, this is what they look for when they are investigating allegations of abuse. It's the negligent or willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or cruel punishment that results in physical or emotional harm or pain to an elderly or disabled person. And it's going to be by the caretaker, family member, or other individual who has an ongoing relationship with the person. And you want to pay close attention to all the items that are in bold. Caretaker, family member, or other individual who has an ongoing relationship with the person, because this is what is considered an alleged perpetrator. For the purpose of Adult Protective Services, we investigate allegations for an alleged perpetrator. They have to be someone that is known to our clients. It can't be that it's someone who was walking in the store and pushed them down. That person is not known to them. That is assault, possibly, and it should be reported to law enforcement. But for the purposes of adult protective services, our investigations will be someone that is known to our client, being a caretaker, family member, or other individual with an ongoing relationship. So what are some indicators that you can look for abuse? Bruises, burns, and unexplained injuries. So these are just indicators. Please be clear that just because there's an indicator, it does not mean that abuse is existing in the situation, but there are indicators, and it's things that we will look further into. Being pushed or shoved or manipulated by force. And sometimes these indicators come from what is considered caregiver burnout. So people who are caring for others may need a break or may need respite. And so they're doing things out of, just frustration and being tired. Being bathed, changed, or dressed with unnecessary force, or having their limbs placed or forced in an unnatural or painful position. And we can find this sometimes when you have someone who might be suffering from a cognitive impairment and they like to wander, and the family members just want them to be seated. They want them the caretaker just wants them to sit down. And so these are indicators, and it can be considered or validated on as abuse if that's found. We also investigate verbal and emotional abuse, and it's much harder to prove, but we do have indicators that we look for and that are present at times where there's verbal or emotional abuse. Fear of the perpetrator is a big one because things that are being said to the client causes them to be intimidated or in fear of what the perpetrator might do. Low self-esteem or depression, and that can manifest itself by a person who was always outgoing. They would come outside and sit on the porch, wave at all the neighbors, and now there's a caretaker involved and they're never coming out of the house. And when they do come out of the house, they're unhappy, or they don't look like how you've seen them previously. So that could be an indicator that there could be some verbal abuse going on. Caretaker is yelling, cursing, or screaming. And that's a big one. If it is a paid caretaker, there should never be an incident where they're yelling, cursing, or screaming. But when it's a family member, there could be instances where they are yelling, cursing, or screaming. That could be an indicator, but we also look at family dynamics in that situation because it could be the way that they communicate. Maybe the client yells, curses, and screams, and then the caretaker, that's a family member or friend and not a paid caretaker, now they yell, curse, and scream. So it could be a family dynamic, but we look at it as an indicator. And then threats of harm or intimidation factors. We always look at those as indicators because if the client believes that they are in fear of threat or harm, it can intimidate them into doing other things, such as neglecting themselves or even being exploited because they have threats of harm or intimidation by the alleged perpetrator. We also investigate sexual abuse, and sexual abuse is any non-consensual sexual activity, which may include, but is not limited to, any activity that would be sexually oriented per the Texas Penal Code. And this includes things such as indecent exposure, public indecency, groping, harassment, or touching. And this can be by a paid or non-paid caretaker, a family member, or any other individual who has an ongoing relationship with the alleged victim. Again, everything that is in bold, these are considered alleged perpetrators for the purpose of adult protective services. It's going to be someone that is known to the clients. With sexual abuse, and actually any abuse that could constitute a crime, we work very closely with law enforcement, but especially with sexual abuse, that the referral to law enforcement is going to be made very early on so that law enforcement can start a criminal investigation if they feel that is necessary. So any non-consensual sexual activity, and then of course, the alleged perpetrators are in bold. Well, so what are some indicators of sexual abuse? So remember, we do investigate for those who are 18 to 64 with a substantial impairment. So some of these lean directly to people who are in that age bracket. Sexually transmitted disease, unexplained pregnancy, unexplained rectal bleeding, bruising or other injuries that are in places that would not be normally bruised in regular daily activity. So that could be bruising on the inner thighs or on the buttocks, things like that, and that aren't able to be explained. Those are some indicators that we look for in sexual abuse. Unexplained pregnancy, of course, when if a client suffers from intellectual or developmental disability, and then they're not able to consent, unexplained pregnancy is something that could be an indicator of sexual abuse. So we also have neglect. So our definition of neglect. Now, in thinking back to those initial slides when we talked about facts and figures, and over 100,000 of our intakes include an allegation of neglect, this definition is going to explain why that number would be so high. Because neglect is the only definition and an allegation that a client can actually do to themselves. So not only could there be an alleged perpetrator of neglect, the client can actually neglect themselves. And what does that look like? It's the failure to provide for oneself the goods or services, including medical services, which are necessary to avoid physical or emotional harm or pain, or the failure of a caretaker to provide such goods or services. So for neglect, it could be something that the client is actually doing to themselves. And so that is why there are so many intakes that include the allegation of neglect, because the client themselves could be the one perpetrating that against themselves. So what are some of the indicators that we look for when neglect is involved? Malnutrition, dehydration, or poor hygiene, those are always indicators. Evidence of inadequate care. And that could be where the caretaker is supposed to be in the home, and you recognize that they leave the home every day at 8 o'clock and don't return until 8 o'clock in the evening, but they're supposed to be providing care to the client. Unsafe or unsanitary living conditions, that could be an indicator. And unsafe or unsanitary living conditions are different from a dirty home, a nasty home, or a home that you wouldn't want your mother to live in. It's unsafe and unsanitary, different from dirty. Lack of basic necessities or needed equipment. So it could be that they need a walker or a wheelchair, things that they need in order to mobilize around the home, a blood pressure cuff or a glucose monitor, and they don't have those basic necessities or that needed equipment in order to maintain their health and safety. Over or under medicating. And that could be an indicator that the perpetrator is doing something to the client by either providing too much medication or not providing the client with the medication in a timely manner or when they're supposed to receive it. So what are some of the behavior indicators that we look for when we are engaged with the client or even the alleged perpetrator? We're looking for fear, anxiety, and nervousness. Are they open and upfront with us when we are investigating and asking questions? Is there a refusal or reluctance to talk in the presence of the caretaker? That's always a sign. In our policy, we want to make sure that we are talking to the client by themselves without anyone else present. But because clients have rights, sometimes they can request that that person who is the perpetrator is in the room during our interview with them. Disorientation or confusion. And this could be either they are actually disoriented or confused, or they're pretending to be because they don't want to say what's happening in their situation, whether it's abuse or neglect. Agitation or any contradictory statements. We're looking to see if collaterals and the client and the alleged perpetrator, are these statements adding up? Afraid to get family in trouble. A lot of times the clients will express that they don't want to get their family members in trouble. They don't want to get their son or daughter or friend or close friend in trouble. And another indicator that we hear verbally is that there's no one else to help me. There's no one else who's available to provide this care that I need. And so they we look at that as an indicator that there might be something more going on. And last but not least, Adult Protective Services, we investigate exploitation. And exploitation is the illegal or improper acts or process of a caretaker, family member, or other individual who has an ongoing relationship with the elderly or disabled person, using the resources of that elderly or disabled person for their own monetary or personal benefit, profit, or gain. And it is without the informed consent of the elderly or disabled person. And that's very important, without the informed consent. And so exploitation is on the rise. A lot of elderly people are being exploited by family members or other individuals who are close to them. Again, everything that's bolded, these are considered alleged perpetrators for the purposes of Adult Protective Services. Unfortunately, we do not investigate scams or frauds because those people who defraud them or scam them are not known to the client. And generally, they're not known to anyone because, it's a scam. It could be someone who's just on the phone or online. We don't know who it could actually be. So it has to be someone who's actually known to the client. And again, it's without the informed consent of the elderly or disabled person. And also, just to add to that, there can be no informed consent when the client or the alleged perpetrator knew or should have known that the client is not able to consent based on cognitive impairment or mental deficit. So people can't just say, well, I know my grandma wanted to give me the money, even though they know grandma is unable to consent to give money because grandma is in, the final stages of Alzheimer's disease. So it's things like that that are illegal or improper, and Adult Protective Services would investigate that, and someone could be validated upon for exploitation. Exploitation, not only does it cause financial hardship, but there's more of an impact of financial exploitation. Outside of the loss of resources, there is also a loss of independence. A lot of times when money is taken from someone who is elderly or substantially impaired, they're unable to maintain where they're living or to pay for where they're living, and so they lose that independence. There's an increase in mental health issues. And why is that? It's because, again, the person who is exploiting them is known to the elderly person or the person who is substantially impaired. It's someone generally that they trust and they have put their trust in. And now this person has betrayed that trust. And so that can cause, anxiety, depression, and other feelings of unwell-being. They have an inability to pay their expenses. A lot of elderly people like to pay their bills and pay them on time. And when they lose their resources, they're not able to do that. And that causes them mental distress as well. There is also the inability to replace lost assets. At ages 75, 80, they're not able to go back to work and replace those assets or the things that have been exploited from them. They don't have, not only don't they have the time, but they're not in a state to go back to work. And they have an inability to hire or to pursue legal protections and remedies. Again, it's someone that's known to them. So generally they want to protect that person, and they're reluctant to hire an attorney to pursue any legal protections in order to stop that person from the exploitation or to hold them accountable for exploitation. So what are some indicators that we're looking for in financial exploitation? There could be sudden changes in the bank account or banking practices. Adult Protective Services is now working really closely with banks because banks, that's where you would see those sudden changes in banking practices. An account that usually has 2 transactions a month now has, 15 to 20 transactions a month. That's a change in their banking practice. Unexplained withdrawals or a lot of money and sometimes they're accompanied by the alleged victim. So the client coming into the bank, or going to the store several times, withdrawing money, getting cash over, and they're always accompanied by someone else. That could be an indicator of financial exploitation. Unapproved withdrawals of funds using an ATM card. A lot of elderly people don't frequent ATM machines. So if someone now has an ATM card and they're using this and they're withdrawing frequently, that's possibly a sign of exploitation. And then unexplained missing funds or valuables. If the client can't explain what happened, to things in their home or even to their home, they don't know where this credit card came from or where it went, then that could be a possible indicator of financial exploitation. Additional indicators of financial exploitation. One thing that we like to remind everyone is that financial exploitation does not usually exist in an allegation by itself. Usually when there is financial exploitation, it's coexisting with another form of abuse. And that could be physical abuse, or it could be neglect. So some other indicators that we look for is providing substandard care. So not only are you exploiting them for their funds, you're not ensuring that they get the care that they need, either in the home or by paying doctors or paying nurses. So providing substandard care. Unpaid bills despite having enough money. So if you know that a person has always paid their bills on time, they've always been able to cover all of their bills, and now they inexplicably can't pay their light bill or can't pay the water bill or are having trouble purchasing medications, that might be an indicator. A lot of times there's an appearance of someone who was previously uninvolved, and now they're coming and they're swooping in, and they're going to be the person to handle all of the affairs and manage all of the possessions. That's an indicator that there could be a vulnerability for financial exploitation. And then sometimes we see that when someone is being exploited, the person that is exploiting them, the alleged perpetrator, is providing unnecessary services for the client. They could be purchasing vehicles, saying that they need to take the client to the doctor. So they're providing unnecessary services while utilizing the client's money to fund those unnecessary services. So what indicators do we look for for the perpetrator? It's always a red flag if they prevent us from speaking to the client. If they don't want the client to see visitors, family, or friends, then that could be an indicator. If they have anger or indifference towards the client. Again, these are indicators. It doesn't always mean that abuse, neglect, or exploitation is present, because sometimes that indifference could come from caregiver burnout. They might need resources themselves so that they can, better help the person that they are caring for. An indicator could be a history of substance abuse, mental illness, or criminal behavior, or even family violence. So those are just some things that we look at when looking at abuse, neglect, or exploitation with a perpetrator. And then always pay attention to the affection towards the client. Do they have a genuine care for the person that they're caring for? Are they engaged in the client's care and are trying to just do what's best for the client? Or do they not even have an affection towards this client and it's very matter of fact? These are always indicators that we're looking at. Additional indicators could be conflicting accounts of incidents. A lot of times people will tell you or tell us, oh, they have dementia, they don't remember, they don't know. We always listen to the client. We have to do our own investigation. So we look at those conflicting accounts and we try to corroborate with other collaterals to determine what the truth of the matter is. They can talk about the client being a burden. A lot of times, again, sometimes you can become a caregiver and it was not your plan. And so that job becomes a burden because the person is also living or trying to live their life, but they're also having to be a caregiver, and that wasn't a planned action for them. They show more concern for the inheritance than for the client. Sometimes people withhold the client's money because they believe it's theirs once the client passes away. So they're concerned about maintaining that inheritance instead of providing the client with the care that they might need. And then they blame the client for their actions. Some of you may have heard, oh, she knows what she's doing. The client could be cognitively impaired, and They know what they're doing. They know how to go to the bathroom instead of actually, making sure that the client have what they need in order to maintain, their safety and their dignity. And then sometimes we see that people are very flirtatious or coy, and that's a possible indicator of an inappropriate sexual relationship. Sometimes the clients could be under an undue influence of a person who is flirting with them or is coy with them. And so they're doing things that they wouldn't normally do because that person has a hold over them. So let's talk a little bit about investigations. I'm gonna get a drink of water. One moment. All right, investigations. So who do we investigate? So we investigate the client, the caretaker, family member, or any other person with an ongoing relationship with the alleged victim. And when we say investigate, these are also these categories are also people that we can provide services and resources to assist the client. So we investigate the client, the caretaker, family members, or any person with an ongoing relationship with the alleged victim. We can gather information in order to help them, to provide services, or to do an investigation to determine whether abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation is valid based on the intake that we've received. Where do we investigate? Adult Protective Services in-home investigations. We are responsible for investigating in the community, people who reside in their private homes or residences. And when we say homes, that doesn't mean it has to be a single family home. This is in your apartment, townhome, trailer, mobile home. If you reside in the community, Adult Protective Services is responsible for investigating abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. Also in adult foster homes, and people may be familiar with board and care homes. Those are unlicensed, but they should be permitted in some jurisdictions, homes where there are fewer, 3 or fewer individuals living in the home who are not related. And so we would investigate in those homes as well. And so places like the hospital, we don't investigate clients that are people who are, in the hospital. We do have some investigations that when they're being discharged from the hospital, or that those investigations happen prior to them going to the hospital, but we don't investigate in licensed facilities. So only in the community, in those private homes or residences and adult foster homes where the client is in the community. So what does an investigation look like? Like, what are we looking to do? We are looking to determine if there is an immediate intervention necessary. We're going to conduct a client face-to-face visit. You can see that client face-to-face and assess that client situation. Throughout the investigation, we're going to conduct a safety assessment. So initially, we're going to conduct a safety assessment, and anytime throughout the investigation or the life of the case that we need to reassess, we will conduct a safety assessment as well. We're going to initiate collateral contacts. So any person that is a collateral in that case, we are going to reach out to them and contact them to gain more information regarding the client situation. While doing this, we're going to document and collect any other evidence. That Chapter 48 allows us to get any records that we need to get in order to ensure that we're providing the services needed for the client, and we get a clear understanding of the client situation. And that can include medical records, mental health records, hospital records. It can include bank records. So we're going to document and collect any evidence we need to address those allegations. And then we're going to determine if there are any emergency services that are needed, meaning is there anything that is emergent that has to happen in order to ensure the client's safety. So we have an investigative process. And this will be a general overview. Believe me, by the time you get through this, you won't know how to work a case, but you'll definitely know how our investigators work a case and what happens once they receive the case. So the investigative process begins once that report is made to our statewide intake. And once it's made to statewide intake based on the address and zip code, it is routed to the appropriate community and assigned to a caseworker with a priority assignment. That priority assignment can range anywhere from priority 1 to priority 4. based on the information received in the intake, that's how the priorities are assigned. So the priority could be a 1. A priority 1 means a face-to-face visit will be attempted or completed within 24 hours of that case being received by statewide intake. Priority 2 means within 3 days, an attempted face-to-face, it'll either be done or attempted within 3 days. Priority 3 means within 7 days, a face-to-face will be completed or attempted. And a priority 4, which is only reserved for those intakes that only have the allegation of exploitation. So the only allegation in the report is exploitation. And then a face-to-face will be attempted or completed within 14 days of that being received by statewide intake. But it's important to note that no matter what the priority assignment is, within 24 hours of the case being received by statewide intake, a case initiation will be completed by an APS investigator. And what is a case initiation? It means that the caseworker or the investigator will confirm with someone who has current and reliable information that the client will be safe with their basic needs met until that face-to-face can be made. So they're going to reach out to determine, is this priority that it has been assigned, is it sufficient? And I want to confirm that the client is going to have all of their needs met and will be safe until that face-to-face visit can be made. Throughout the investigation process, there will be an interview with the alleged victim. Collaterals will be interviewed. If there's an alleged perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator will be interviewed. We will gather evidence, speak with other collaterals such as doctors, nurses, hospice, home health, the bank if necessary. Sometimes we have to talk to the leasing office, just depending on what the allegation is. We're going to gather all of that information. And we're going to gather that information to determine if the allegations that are alleged in the report, if they are valid or invalid, or if we're not able to determine. And if they are valid, we want to provide and try to provide services and resources, again, to prevent or alleviate that maltreatment, all working towards the investigation conclusion. Now, we want to make sure that we understand that sometimes there will be an investigation conclusion, but there won't be an investigation solution. And that's because we deal with adults, and with adult protective services, our clients have rights. And we're going to move right into our clients' rights. So we are happy as adult protective services to provide or furnish protective services to a person who is age 65 years and older, or an adult with that disability or substantial impairment, with that person's consent. We are happy to. That's actually our favorite thing to do. When they consent to allow us to help them, we're happy to provide those protective services, referrals, and interventions. Or we can provide it without that person's consent if the person lacks the capacity to consent and meet certain criteria. So what is the capacity to consent? A person lacks the capacity to consent to receive protective services if, because of a mental or physical impairment, that person is incapable of understanding the nature of the services offered and agreeing to receive or to reject protective services. So it's not just that the person is stubborn and they've been stubborn their entire life. It's not just that they're not doing what their daughter wants them to do. It's not that they are it's not just that the person is not living how we would expect them to live. It's that this person is incapable of understanding the nature of the services offered and agreeing to receive or to reject those protective services. And so that's when a person is considered to lack capacity, the capacity to consent. Now, it's important to understand that APS specialists do not determine capacity. We are not medical doctors. We have no medical degrees. Most of us do not. And if some of us do, I don't know why we would still be investigating here. But we are not the ones to determine if a client has capacity. We will seek an evaluation from a medical or mental health professional to determine whether the client is physically or mentally capable of making informed decisions. The action that the APS specialist takes is going to depend on the client's level of safety. And it's important to remember that each APS investigation and the actions in the case, it's really going to be on a case-by-case basis. Although we have policy that really structures what we do, each client situation can be almost completely different. For example, there could be a concern regarding a client's capacity, but they are in a safe environment. And so would we need to move forward to get an actual statement of their capacity? Probably not, because the client is safe and the client is in a safe environment. So there's no need in order to get a statement of capacity because the client is not in a state of neglect. They're in a safe environment where their needs are being met. So seeking a medical or mental health evaluation is not always necessary, but of course, it may be appropriate in some situations. But if you don't remember anything from this slide, just remember that Adult Protective Services specialists, we do not determine capacity. So that is not something that we can determine. It's going to be, the next slide will tell us what it's going to do. What we can do, though, is we can assess the client situation. We're going to determine if there are any identified danger factors that indicate that there's a possible lack of capacity. And state legislature has provided us with wonderful tools and the systems that we use as we are assessing clients. And so there are certain danger factors that if they are present, then it causes the situation to go in a different way. However, that's what the APS specialist is going to do: assess the client situation, determine if there are any identified danger factors that indicate a possible lack of capacity. So it could be possible that the client lacks capacity. Again, we wouldn't be able to determine that. The caseworker or specialist may have to make more visits and conduct more as necessary to determine whether there are signs that a client lacks capacity to consent to service. And while they're doing this, again, remember that the line of how we're investigating, they could also be requesting medical records, talking to family members and other collaterals, gathering that information to determine if there are more indicators that the client may lack capacity. But in the end, it's going to be obtained from a medical professional, and it's going to be the professional that we're going to ask for a written statement of the following: the client's physical and or mental condition, and if the client is at serious risk of harm. This process always includes consults with the supervisor, and it can also include consults with the subject matter experts and the legal team when necessary. So again, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but Adult Protective Services would not be making the determination. The determination of the client's capacity would be made by the doctor, and then if necessary, it'll be adjudicated by a judge. And it can come from indicators from us assessing the client situation, but we wouldn't be able to make that decision about their capacity. Because again, our clients have rights. And those rights also include the right for them to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. So the client has the right to refuse to cooperate with the investigation, but they do not have the right to stop the investigation. So Adult Protective Services, even without the client's consent, can continue an investigation by investigating, by talking to collaterals, doctors, other people who have knowledge regarding the situation and the allegations to make a determination. The client has the right to refuse entry into the home. They can not allow Adult Protective Services to come into the home. They can refuse protective services if they have the capacity to consent. So they can allow us to do the investigation. They can allow us to come into the home, and then they can say, but I don't want any services. I'm fine just how I am, and this is how I want to be. If they have the capacity to consent, they can definitely refuse protective services. They can also participate in service planning. And again, this is what we love. This is the favorite thing that we like, when they participate in service planning and they say, absolutely, we're happy to accept these services. We're happy to accept the interventions, and we're able to put services in place. but they also have the right to the least restrictive alternatives. And that's because we want our clients to have their safety and independence and dignity as long as possible. So they have the right to choose least restrictive alternatives. They can also refuse medical treatment, and that's based on their religious beliefs, and that's regardless of capacity. The reason that we work so closely with our clients and we try to do something that's amenable to them is because if ever we have to go a legal route, the client will be appointed a court-appointed attorney ad litem. And that attorney is going to advocate for the client's rights. So it's important that we pay close attention to the client's rights and make sure that we don't overstep, because if at any point we do have to go the legal route, the client is going to have someone who will vigorously advocate for them as well. So we do have some legal alternatives because sometimes there are situations where we may need to take steps further in order to protect the client. So when there are concerns of that there is a threat, an imminent threat to the client's life or safety, we do have some legal alternatives that we can utilize. The emergency order of protection, again, an imminent threat to the client's health or safety, then we're able to ask a judge to allow us to place the client in a safe place or to get them evaluated if it's a medical condition. And then that doesn't last long. Just so you know, that emergency order of protection is only good for 10 days initially, and we have to show proof that we need to keep the client where we're keeping them or keep them in a safe place. And then the judge, again, they're going to have their ad litem. And so someone is going to be speaking for them and what they want to advocate for. We can also request a court authorized entry. Again, we are not able to enter a client's home without that client's consent. And so if we believe that the client is behind that door and there's no one else in that home and there is a threat to their life or safety, they are in immediate need of medical attention, then we can request from a judge a court authorized entry. We can also request we can ask for an injunction to prohibit interference with an investigation or protective services. Sometimes we have alleged perpetrators who will block all access to the client. And we don't know the situation or the state of that client until we have to ask a judge to provide us with an injunction to prohibit that interference so that we are able to work with the client to determine if they do need protective services. And again, Chapter 40 and 48 gives us unrestricted access to records. We can request records from the bank, mental health, medical doctors. We can request ledgers from mortgage companies or from rental agencies. So we can get all of that information to make informed decisions. And we can also petition guardianship to Health and Human Services Commission. So after we have tried all least restrictive, probably multiple times, if the client, we believe that a guardianship will protect the client and keep them from being in a state of not to keep them safe, then we can petition guardianship to Health and Human Services. Now, just because we petition guardianship, it does not mean it will be granted, because the Office of Guardianship Services will determine whether or not they want Adult Protective Services to do more, to try some additional least restrictive alternatives, and whether the client is appropriate for guardianship. So even though we petition, it doesn't always mean we'll receive it. We may have to start over and do a lot of different things to try and get the client to be safe without a guardian. So service delivery, what does that look like? When we are trying to work with our client, we want it to be an individual plan, because in order for them to buy into what we're doing, we have to let them know that they are a part of it. We want them to define the problem and decide on a course of action that they are comfortable accepting. We want to develop this plan to reduce or eliminate further risk of harm. So we are always working with the client step by step to determine what the best course of action is in order to reduce or eliminate that risk of harm. What are some of the potential courses of action? We can help the client by finding money management resources. We can set up provider services such as Meals on Wheels or emergency response system. We can connect them with other agencies for continued assistance. We can assist with things like home improvement so that they can continue to live in their home safely. And that can include grab bars, ramps. We could clear out hallways where there might be a hoarding situation. We can also provide a safe environment. Sometimes our clients need to be removed from a situation temporarily so that, maybe they need to evict someone that's been in the home and they don't feel safe while that eviction is taking place. So we want to provide them with a safe environment while that's happening. Medication assistance. We can purchase medications for the client. We don't want them going without medication that they need in order for them to maintain their health. We can immediately intervene for the client's safety. So if there is a situation where there is an immediate intervention required, we can immediately intervene in order to keep the client safe. And then, like we talked about, we can, as the most restrictive option, make a referral to guardianship. We have some other courses of action as well. We can assist with food. We purchase life-sustaining medications, but any medications or other supplies, things like Depends or toiletries, things that the client might need in order to maintain their hygiene, clothes. Those are other things that we can provide in order to alleviate or prevent neglect or further maltreatment. We can provide or connect them with emergency shelters or alternate living arrangements. So we work well with the community so that we have these things at our disposal when the clients need them. Heavy house cleaning and minor home repairs. We connect with community agencies that provide those minor home repairs. And if not, there is a certain amount that the legislature in Texas has provided for purchase client services in order for us to be able to get some of those things for the clients. We can help with utilities, medical and psychiatric assessments, and we can help facilitate services provided by other agencies. And so those are agencies that we like to have a really good working relationship with so that once we need to refer the client to those agencies, that we know that they'll be taken care of from that point on. So we already talked about this a little bit, so we'll go through this probably really quickly. Check the time. Okay, I think we're doing pretty good. This is APS and clients' rights because we talked about just the client's rights, but how does that look when we are working as adult protective services specialists or investigators? How does that look when it comes to the clients and APS and making sure that we aren't overstepping and that the community understands sometimes the client's rights will win out. So just a few things, notes about adult protective services. Our legal authority comes from the Human Resource Code and the Texas Administrative Code, and all of our actions are civil. So all of our actions are civil. We are not a criminal investigations agency. That is law enforcement. Again, we work very closely with law enforcement. We do refer to law enforcement, but all of our actions are civil. We do not have the authority to remove people from their home or mandate services unless they meet certain criteria and conditions for us to seek an emergency removal in a court order. And again, based on clients' rights, we're going to start with least restrictive first, because once we go to court, the judge wants to know, what did you do to avoid this situation before you came before me? And so we want to make sure that we try everything in our power to do a lot of services before we have to take it to that next level. When clients have the capacity to make decisions, they have the right to refuse services. So they can refuse services such as home cleaning. They can refuse to take medications, but the investigation is not optional. So we are required to continue the investigation, whether the client is cooperative or not. So we may be able to determine based on medical records and blood levels of medications that the client is not taking their medications correctly with the client not participating in that investigation. So just because they're able to refuse, again, that doesn't mean that we are going to stop the investigation. With the appropriate information provided in the report, we are able to continue that investigation whether the client cooperates or not. And the big one, we do not have any emergency shelters or placement. We work with law enforcement, we work with homeless shelters, we work with skilled nursing facilities to find temporary placements or sometimes long-term placements if necessary. And that can include like hotels or apartments, but there is no like APS skilled nursing facility in every town. That doesn't exist. These are all built by relationships that we have in the communities where the clients are, so that we can place them if necessary. And if a client refuses to leave their home and they need assistance, we have to pursue the least restrictive alternatives before we can place them in a skilled facility. And again, that's because someone will always, an attorney will always advocate for the client's rights when we have to take it to a judge to try to have them placed. So we want to make sure we do everything we can that's least restrictive before we move to the most restrictive. So even with all of this that we're doing, we still have challenges. And with those challenges, it comes the opportunity for us to collaborate more with other agencies and others in the community. We know that there are limitations for in-home care, especially in outlying areas. There's not many choices for in-home or home health care. There are people who are denied long-term care, so they don't have the resources to be in a skilled nursing facility long-term because they are denied those long-term care resources. And there's inadequate community services for the mentally ill or those suffering mental health challenges, including the reduction of those state-supported living centers, moving them into more communal areas. And since that is the case and those waiting lists are so long, that is a challenge that we face, and it's faced by other people who deal with those with mental health challenges and the elderly in the community. So we do try to work with as many community agencies as possible, but we do find that these challenges still exist. There's not a lot of access to preventative or early intervention services for those at risk for abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. You know, just because someone is vulnerable, it doesn't mean they will become someone who is abused or neglected, but we want them to know early on that an agency exists to help them and other services and resources exist. And most people don't have a lot of access to getting that information early. And then, of course, specialized geriatric social worker training. It's not keeping up with the population. As we talked about in the very first slides, how many elder adults are in the state of Texas. Throughout the country, that number is rising, especially with the turnover of the baby boomers who are now turning 65 month after month. Specialization in geriatric social work, that training is not keeping up with the population. But we are out in the community, including colleges and universities, to let them know how important it is for them to pay attention to this population, because it is the largest growing population, the largest growing demographic. And so we want more of them to be engaged in what is good for the growth of the society as it pertains to the geriatric population. And then there's a lot of post-pandemic isolation and a loss of services. So a lot of services changed or morphed that provided services to the elderly or to people who were homebound throughout the pandemic. And so some of those services didn't come back, and some people just aren't coming out again. They don't want to engage in those services that they had prior to the pandemic. And so we're seeing that as some of the challenges as well. And so certain programs are geared towards making them aware of the services and trying to get those services that they had previous to the pandemic back into their homes. And last but not least, now that you have all of this wonderful information, what do we do with it? What do we do when we see those indicators or those signs? How do we report? So first, we're going to talk about who's required to report. In the state of Texas, the law mandates that any person 18 years or older who suspects that a vulnerable adult is in a state of abuse, neglect, or exploitation shall immediately report the information to Adult Protective Services. This does not mean that you should tell your best friend and ask them to call. It doesn't mean that you should tell your supervisor. It means if you see it, you shall report it. If you suspect it, you should report it immediately to Adult Protective Services. And when you make that report, what do we need to provide? It's very important that you provide the name, age, and address of the vulnerable adult. We do like to have the reporter's name and contact information. That information is kept confidential. It will never be shared unless a judge asks for that to be shared. We want a brief description of the situation and the vulnerable adult. So not only the situation, but any information that you have regarding that vulnerable adult, including injuries, medical problems, behavior problems, any people or any members of the household or who are involved with the client who could possibly be an alleged perpetrator. Anything that you know about the history of that household or their interactions. We want as many collaterals as you can provide. If you know the doctor, provide that. If you know the daughter, the son, the nephew, provide all of those collaterals, because that's going to be a way for us to gather information to get a good picture of the client situation. And we want you to explain how you know about the situation. Is this something you observed? Is this something someone told you? Did you see it? Did you read it in a report? We want to know how you are connected to that situation, so that going in, we know this information is firsthand, or this might be information that was told by someone else. And now we need to speak to the person who actually saw that, who actually provided that information initially. So we do want as much information as you can provide. And also it helps us when you're providing that information. If you know that there are any concerns for aggressive dogs, aggressive people, please provide that in the report for the safety of our investigators, because they are going out to these homes, and we want to make sure that not only the client is safe, but that the investigator is safe as well. We also have the option for you to report online, and reporting online is a little bit different than calling statewide intake, because you're completing questions previously, like an outline of questions. So be as detailed as possible. We want to know the who, what, when, where, and how you know. We want the information to be as current and as relevant as possible, especially towards the client situation. When you have the opportunity for that person's list, again, provide as much information about collaterals that you can. That information always helps the investigator, especially when creating a service plan. And when creating the narrative for the online report, please make sure that the information is clear and precise, that you use the same name for the client throughout the report, the same name for the alleged perpetrator throughout the report, because when they receive those reports, they want to be able to differentiate if you're talking about the client, or if you're talking about, the alleged perpetrator, or the daughter, or the nephew. So all of that needs to be clear and concise whenever you're making a report online. And again, the reporter information will always be kept confidential unless it's adjudicated by a judge. The information that you provide in the report is always going to be helpful to the caseworker. So as much information that you can provide is always, the more you can provide, the better. We'll never say, we didn't need that information. We'll always appreciate it. And last but not least, how do you file it? So our abuse hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can make a report by calling the 1-800 number, which is 1-800-252-5400. Or if it's a non-urgent concern, then we have a secure website, and that's texasabusehotline.org. The reason that we say non-urgent is because when you make the report online, it doesn't get routed as quickly as the report that you make via the phone, because they review it, find out where it goes, and then it's routed to that area based on the zip code provided in the report. So if it is emergent, or if it's something that is important, and when I say emergent, if it's emergent, dial 911 first. But if it is something that you're like, I want somebody as soon as possible, I want to make sure that I, give all the information that I can, please make the report via the phone so that you can speak with someone in statewide intake. And again, just as a reminder, the reporter's information is confidential. It will not be shared. An investigator will never share your information with the alleged victim or the perpetrator or any of the collaterals. So you can be safe to provide that information so that we can reach you, so that we can collect more information if necessary. So, all of this said, just to remind you to be a champion for older Texans. And since I know that there are people from across the country, for older adults and those with disabilities or substantial impairment. Be a champion, report when you should report. And if you have any questions, this is the time.
Wow, that was really incredible. You did an incredible job. But I'm gonna stay back here and let you guys answer any questions. But real quick, I just want to put in that I'll put the links to the reporting information in the follow-up email as well.
Thank you, Marty. Do we have questions?
There are some questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
And Sue's been answering. I know that they've been answering several questions along the way.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yay, thank y'all.
And I believe that you guys can see. I know we can, but I believe that the participants can see the questions that have already been answered and the answers by clicking on the top when you go to answered questions as opposed to open questions. But I don't know that you can see the open questions, to be honest with you, but you should be able to see the answers to the questions that have been answered.
Okay, so are these the ones here that haven't been answered, these here? Can you provide a link to online reporting? Am I saying this right?
Yeah, that one, that's
Oh.
exactly right. And that's what I was trying to say. I will provide that in the not only in the follow-up email, but you provided that right in your last slide anyway. So it was
Okay.
provided after they asked the question. But
Oh, okay.
I'll include that in the chat.
Okay,
But
so
yes,
then,
those are the questions.
okay, how common is it for family relationship to have a strain or stress among each other after an APS investigation of a family member? How common is it for family relationship to have a strain or stress among each other after APS investigation? So when you say after an APS investigation of a family member, do you mean like as an alleged perpetrator, family member, or like the client is the family member? I don't. So I guess I'll just answer both. I mean, our investigators are very professional. We avoid at all costs being pulled into family dynamics. So our focus is going to be on the clients and on the client's safety and their well-being. Whether the family is going to have stress among each other, that's usually going to be something that either existed prior to Adult Protective Services' involvement, but it's not anything that would be new, because we are going to provide, our focus is going to be on the client. And so while we're focusing on the client, if that's what the family members are focusing on as well, then there shouldn't be any strain or stress. Now, if a family member is an alleged perpetrator, I can't speak to that, because if they're an alleged perpetrator, there might be some stress there among each other, because obviously someone is accusing them of either abusing, neglecting, or exploiting the client. But if it is just, APS is involved, and is there going to be stress in the family? No, because, well, there shouldn't be, because we're going to focus on the client and their safety and well-being. And I hope that answers the question. Or you can just email me and we can talk about it. What about schools? And I'm going to let Kim or Erika answer that one, because we do investigate in schools.
I don't know, Sue. I know, Sue. We have issues. But Kim, do you want to talk and answer that? Do you want to unmute yourself?
We do investigate. We don't investigate the actual schools, but we investigate a client if the client is over, has to be at least 18. We would investigate that. If
But the other would go to Child Protective Services. Is that not correct?
it will go to Child Protective Services if they're over the age of 18. But if
No,
they're,
the other way.
I
If
mean,
they're under the age of 18.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
We'll go to
Yes.
Child Protective Services if they're under the age of 18.
Yes.
But if they're
Yes.
over the age of 18, it's us.
Yes.
Yeah, Adult Protective Services would investigate.
Very good.
Anything, state of Texas and residents needs document to recertify for Medicaid. State of Texas and resident needs documents to recertify for Texas Medicaid. I'm sorry. I don't understand the state of Texas resident needs documents to recertify for Medicaid. I don't know if that's asking, does Adult Protective Services help with that? But we would refer them to, just depending on what documents they need. That would probably be a case by case, because we don't, if they need ID, they have to go through, the Department of Public Safety. Like we don't have any documents for them. So it would just, we have to figure out what that question, like what they actually need, and if Adult Protective Services is able to assist in that, or just refer them to an agency that might be able to help them. Do we get a status on a report we have made? So once the report is made, it's actually the client's confidential case and information. A lot of times you will not get a status on that case. Unless you are a part of the service plan. But then we won't discuss the case with you as the reporter, but we'll discuss like the service plan if you're a part of it. So for example, if report is made by a home health agency and it is because the client was refusing, physical therapy, and now the client is like, oh, okay, yes, I'm okay, I'll take it. I'll get physical therapy now. We're going to call the agency and say, okay, the client would like to have physical therapy. What are the next steps? So that would be a way that you would learn, like the status, because obviously that's what's happening next. But no, in general, the reporter does not receive a status of the report because it is the client's confidential information, and we don't share it unless they request that it's shared. Let's see. And bank records are needed for recertification. Can APS assist? Erika, you want to take that one? You're on mute.
What's the question? Just read the
If a
question.
resident, we're actually having a nursing home symposium. I don't know who sent this one, but if a resident of a nursing home has no responsive NOK, and next of kin, and bank records are needed for recertification, can APS assist due to risk of shelter and benefits? State of
Yes.
Texas.
Yes, we can. If the case is open in exploitation, or we can. If the facility is having a hard time, the case has to be open, and we have to they have to show that they have not been successful on obtaining the records. But we can release bank records to a facility. Yes, we can.
And I don't know if they heard the first part. So if there is an open case already, right?
Yes.
If there is an open case already, then Adult Protective Services can assist and then the nursing home has to show that they have been unsuccessful in retrieving it through their own legal process and corporate teams. And then APS can assist in sharing those records because that'll be for a service. But we also have a nursing home symposium coming up. So
I just want to say that, but that can't be the only reason you call in an APS
Right.
case. Just for the record.
Exactly.
oh,
Yes.
Can you send me the information on the nursing home symposium?
I definitely will.
And I'll include that as well in the follow-up email.
Okay. Yes, I will definitely.
Is that online or is that in a?
It's
No,
going to
it's in
be in Arlington, Texas. It's in person. It's
In
in
Arlington, right here in our backyard. Perfect.
Yes, and its seating is limited. So I'll send it to you on Monday because we have a certain amount that get a chance to pre-register so that because it's limited, but we're gonna do more than one. But so yes, but we do have one coming up. So I will send it to you and then you can just share it out. But I want to make sure that the nursing homes that were provided by the region get a chance to register before.
Yeah. Then the follow-up email for this will go out tomorrow or Friday. So I'm going to include it with that.
Oh, okay. So I'll send it to you before Friday. How about that?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
They'll have a day to register if they want to get in. I mean, the people who we send it to today. Okay, so if a facility puts in an APS report for possible exploitation and has issued a 30-day notice, how does that work with APS? Are there certain requirements that the facility needs to follow?
No, that we would just conduct it as a normal investigation. And
So,
we'll
yeah.
determine on that. Yes. So
Yes.
your case could possibly remain open, and it can also possibly be closed because there are certain policies that we have to follow because the case just cannot come in for failure of payment. So
Right.
it needs to fall under the reasons why APS would even investigate the case. So if they are facing an eviction, then the worker will probably do an investigation, determine, why are they facing the eviction, where the money is going. And sometimes the nursing homes, they just get frustrated. And we're hoping that nursing homes stop allowing time to pass for payment, because it's so much easier if this is an issue at the beginning that we can try to resolve it sooner than later before it gets to the eviction process. So hopefully at the conference that we're getting ready to have, this symposium, that we can answer more questions there. If hopefully y'all are able to attend.
Great. Well, you know what? I'm gonna share my screen real quick because I'm gonna go over the CEUs real quick for those people who have other obligations and have to get off. And it's totally up to you if you want to stay on our panelists and answer other questions afterwards, or if you'd like people to email them. But in the meantime, let me do the let me get this information up about CEUs. So those of you that are joining us for CEUs today, we are set up to provide licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas. If you have a different license in Texas or a license outside of Texas, you're more than welcome to go through the process and get a certificate and submit it to your jurisdiction. But please note that there's no guarantee that they will take them. I will tell you, I've had people tell me that they have used them for other licenses and they've worked. I have also been contacted by jurisdictions in the past asking for more information on a webinar so they can determine whether it meets their standards. But just so you know, we are set up with just the two licenses. We're also offering certificates of attendance. Anyone is eligible to apply for one of those. The rules, the same rules qualify. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 hours of CEU credits. you must have completed the entire live webinar and the Q&A up till 11:30. I realize some of you have other obligations and have to leave, but you must have stayed on till 11:30. You must also complete the Google evaluation survey. That survey, when you close out of Zoom today, you'll get the opportunity to take that survey. I want you to know there's also a post webinar survey that's with SurveyMonkey, that's a part of one of our funding sources requirements. So there's two different post surveys, but note that the Google survey is the one that's required for CEUs, but we do ask you to please fill out both of them. We need to get the funding to be able to put these on, and the only way we do that is we can get the feedback to the people that that provide it to us. The survey, the Google survey, will be available to you until 5 o'clock on the 7th. And if you don't get the link as you close out of Zoom today, don't worry, it will go out in the follow-up email on Friday that will be going out about this webinar. The certificates will be emailed to you in about 4 weeks after we close the survey, so give us a little bit of time to do that. I do want to real quickly plug a survey we have going on next month with Dawn. No, this is the wrong one. This is the one we are. I gotta get down to the end. Sorry. Let me get to the end. This is a real quick, I did a real quick overview of today's. I am so sorry. I don't know how I did that. I had it. There it is. This is the webinar we have next month that Donnie Green will be. Oh, I don't know why I won't stay on that last slide. I am so sorry, you guys. Let me get to it again slowly this time. Okay, Donnie is doing a webinar for us on programs that can consider family members as paid caregivers, that the family members can actually be paid for being a caregiver, and that's going to be next month on the 27th. And again, we'll include the information about the symposium that Nisaa talked to us about just a few minutes ago. I'm going to stop sharing, and you guys, it's totally up to you if you guys have time to answer questions, or if you guys need to go. I know you have obligations too as well.
Oh,
And I haven't been able to follow them all, so you may have already answered them all.
let me see. Kim and Erica, do you want them to email us the remaining questions, or do you have time? I do want to say that we do APS 101 presentations, because I see some kind of specific questions a little bit. And so we do APS 101 presentations that where we might be able to bring in more policy to help with some of these questions. Again, this one is pretty general, and I only included the area that Donnie wanted to have highlighted a little bit more. But we actually come out to agencies, hospitals. We can come anywhere and speak to those things that are, because we really don't want to speak in generalities when, because we do have policy, but again, like I said, some of these things will be case by case scenario. I see one person who says they really struggle with the concept of clients' rights and capacity. but there's really no easy answer for that. Depending on the case and the history, we don't know, but we could talk more about that.
Nisa.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lisa,
I wanted to answer that one.
Okay.
Because that's really the last question after I went through the end. Everything else was, I think you've answered it.
Oh,
But
great. Wonderful.
but the capacity, yet we as workers and as APS, we struggle with that as well. But we usually leave all of that through a doctor's assessment. Because at this point, when you're going into forcing individuals to of something that we don't agree with how they're living, or the condition and state, that is their right as an adult. But that's why we have capacity assessments completed, and we also put in what our concerns are during that capacity assessment. So maybe the doctor, whoever's doing the assessments, can give us some kind of guidance to try to not enforce, but suggest that the individual needs to, have some services in the home, or take your medicine and try it. Because sometimes this part is just that people just don't know what's out there, and they think that it's going to cost them money to accept some services. So we try to teach our workers to build rapport, and we also try to make sure that we are giving whoever is doing that assessment what the condition and what the status of how the client is living, so they can give us that feedback on how to address the situation. But if the person is totally incapacitated, then we will definitely take it to another step.
If there is a APS 102 on a specific area of
That would
this,
be good.
or I would love to do a series of them where we would cover in detail, these different areas. And I would love to have that conversation with you afterwards. Obviously, people were very interested. We had a very large turnout. As you can see, we had, at one point in time, we had 375 people on. That is a huge turnout, even for what we do. So we know that people are hungry for information on this. And so if you have some 102s that get specific into some different areas, I would love to partner with you and do that. And
Yeah.
Are you partnering with Donnie on the nursing home symposium?
No, that we are so the nursing home symposium, because somebody asked. So that one, the topics that are going to be covered are POPs, which is promise of pay payment. So how they complete those forms, those Medicaid forms and the forms for APS. So when there's an APS placement, how they get paid. We're also going to cover Form 1102 through the probate court. They're going to do what guardianship looks like when the realistic timelines, what they're looking for, if it's coming from a skilled nursing facility, how that interacts with adult protective services. And then last but not least, long-term care. When there are barriers to funding or getting those applications approved, what are some tips and tricks and agencies that you can utilize as a skilled nursing facility to ensure that the long-term care is approved for the person that's currently in the facility. So those are the three topics for this nursing home symposium. And no, we're not working with Donnie, but we can definitely do that because we need to hold 2 more.
Can we do that virtually? Because I would be happy to do it with you virtually. Or does that need to be in person?
Well, the POPs form, we want it in person because that's actually a form. The APS contracts is going to walk everyone that's there through completing the form.
I see.
So that there's never an instance where if a client is placed by APS, there's never an instance that they don't know how to get that form completed and where to submit it so that they can get, payment. So that part we do. Yeah.
I'll get Donnie to get in touch with you And see,
Okay.
the fact that you're doing the first one in Arlington is where her office is, I
Uh-huh.
don't know how, but she still would like to partner and do that. But
Yeah.
guardianship may be a good 102. We've done guardianship before, but there's always lots of questions about guardianship. And so guardianship might be a good 102 especially topic that we could do.
Mhm. Yep. I mean,
Will you all?
we tailor work with the SMEs who are here, and we can tailor, presentations so that that information is what's in the where the most of the meat of the presentation is. So just, let us know, and then I will, get with my SMEs. Yay, ladies.
Yeah. One other thing is what might work well is if we did it as a monthly series and we did one a month for a period of time till we covered covered all the topics that you felt would be appropriate.
Okay. Maybe quarterly, Marty? Maybe.
Or maybe quarterly. Okay. Well, we can work that out.
Because
we'll work it out one. It's what works out for you too. I just threw out monthly.
No, I'll ask them. I mean, it wouldn't be up to me. It'll be up to, because we have the presentation, but then we have to go in and pull the policy in specific to what we want to do. So,
yes.
Or, what they want to provide and present on. Because even the ones I added for Donnie, I could have probably added about 6 more because there's, again, because there's a lot of policy, but a lot of it is, scenario based. If this happens, then we're doing this. And so we have to just try to remind people that this is an overview. You're still not going to know everything that APS does or doesn't do, but you'll have a good idea of how, what's guiding what we're doing. And so
but we had, I mean, again, tons of people were very complimentary about and very appreciative of getting this information.
Yay.
So they're hungry for more. And so
we can
and it's up to you. I have a lot of the agencies I work with, a lot of them we do every month. We don't have to do it every month. We can do it every other month. It has to work for both of us. So I'll get with you offline and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. And it's not me. I didn't want to, for me, I'm fine, but I know the SMEs, they have other, obligations. So I just want to make sure that's okay with them. If they say once a month, we'll do it.
We'll take that offline and work that out.
Okay.
But thank you, you guys. Thank you all so much. I mean, seriously, I hope you saw all the compliments. Everybody was so appreciative. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Marty. And thank you, ladies, for joining me. They really came through for me this morning because I was like,
I understand when you got that many people on and you're fielding that many questions. I appreciate all of you, really, every one of you too. So thank you. Thank you all for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. Look forward to the follow-up email, and I'm going to wait till Friday to send it out because we're going to get the flyer on the Nursing Home Symposium.
Yes.
And so I'll wait till Friday to send out the follow-up. Look for that, and please take the post survey that I just posted here just a few minutes ago. I'll repost it right now, but please take the post survey, Monkey, and the Google survey should pop up as you close out today. Thank you all, and you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank y'all so much.